ready for the next one?
Uh-huh.
This was an email. I don't have a name. It says, I recently started reading my children's the NLT Bible. That's the New Living Translation Bible. Before that, I normally read the New King James. Is there any reason I should not continue to read the NLT?
You know, I really like the NLT. A lot of the quotes. A lot of times when I put a quote up on the screen in my Bible studies, I'll use an NLT. Sometimes I'll reference the NLT when I'm quoting from certain passages. And the reason I like it is because it takes passages and gels them down really well, and obviously puts them in modern parlance or modern language. And so when I'm quoting from my Bible, I read a New King James Version. When I'm quoting from my Bible, there's a lot of times that I'm going to have to go through, and I'm going to have to talk about exactly what it means and that kind of thing. And an NLT is a paraphrase. And so what it does is basically kind of teaches what the passage is talking about. It adds things to the passage that are in the passage, but things that you're not going to get in a straight word-for-word translation. One word in Greek, for example, to one word in English. It expands on that whole thing. And
or it takes away sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it takes away. And so whenever I'm dealing with a expanded translation like that, or a paraphrase, I need to always understand that I'm dealing with a paraphrase. It's a tool, and so I would never study out of an NLT. And actually, I don't myself read my Bible in the NLT. I'll reference the NLT when I look up a passage and I think it's going to bring some clarity to what the passage has to say. But I don't study it and I don't read it out of that. And but on the other hand, if I was reading to my kids, then yeah, I wouldn't have a problem reading to them out of the NLT. Not at all. Most of the places that I've seen, it's a good representation of what the passages are talking about, and so I think that's cool. But you have to watch it because it's a paraphrase. And so you're getting a large amount of interpretation rather than just straight the Word of God, basically. And so it's like any other tool that you use as far as understanding the Bible. Commentaries are commentaries. They're comments by teachers on certain passages, and so you don't want to take it as being flat out, this is what the Bible has to say when you're dealing with a commentary. Well, when you're dealing with a translation like that, that's a paraphrase, you have to understand it's a paraphrase. It's not literal word for word. And if you understand that, then it's a good tool. And you don't want to use it beyond what it's designed to be used for.
So when you do a study, and you probably use eSword or something, but BLB or any whatever Bible Help, whatever people that are using, pull up multiple translations on a verse and go through them. Even NIV and NLT or other paraphrases, and not just King James, New King James, and
right. So when you're talking about translation, most times a translation is they're trying to do word for word, like I was saying before. So one word in Greek into one word in English, and so that's usually the design of a translation. Then you have like an NIV, which is more of a thought translation. They'll add words that aren't actually there in the Greek to try to make it a little bit clearer. They just don't go as far as a paraphrase. And what a paraphrase will do is try to take the intent of the passage and bring it across in a way that's understandable to a modern English speaker. And they're not translating it. They're giving you the gist of what the passage is teaching. And admittedly, the NLT it goes through, and a lot of times it is saying exactly what the passage says, but you just have to watch out for it.
Yeah.
And so when I'm studying, I use a word-for-word translation. So like a New King James is a word-for-word translation. New American Standard would be a word-for-word translation of a different Greek text than the New King James. And so King James is the same way, and RSV is the same way. ESV is the same way. They're word-for-word translations. And so if I was studying, that's what I would be using. And then if I want to get a little deeper, then usually sometimes I'll compare. Actually, The only time that I'm comparing translations as far as how they translate a passage is when I want to share that passage with somebody and I want it to be clear as possible. And so that's again what I use an NLT for, or I use an ESV. Sometimes I'm using an NIV for that. But that's what I'm doing with that. I'm not actually using the different translations to study it itself. At that point, what I'm usually doing is picking up my Greek stuff and finding out what the words actually say and how they go together.
Right.
Yeah.
For people that don't know Greek or that aren't a pastor, or maybe they're just a brand new believer, would you say that would be an easier way to do it?
Yeah, I think that if you compare a couple of different translations, then you're not gonna go off on a tangent. You're gonna see that the translations are saying pretty much the same thing, but they're using slightly different wording so that you don't get crazy interpretations.
Right.
So sometimes people aren't familiar with the way that language has changed. So, for example, you pick up a King James version and you read the word communication in a King James version. It talks about let your communication be thus and such. Well, communication at the time that the King James was written was not talking about what we speak about as communication. It's talking about my interaction with you in the sense of fellowship. It's not necessarily talking about what I'm saying to you.
Right.
And so it's a different word altogether, and you're not going to know that unless you know that the English has changed, or unless you're comparing versions.
Yeah.
And when you compare versions, you go, oh, okay, communication doesn't mean what I thought it meant.
Right.
And then you don't get locked in on something that's weird.
So I know pastors that do teach, Calvary Chapel pastors that do teach at NLT. And I was getting into it, but then my first problem I came across was in Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount, and it translated, blessed are the poor. Well, it's blessed are the poor in spirit.
Right.
And if you don't add that part on, it changes the whole rest of the Bible study.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's little things like that where I'm like, okay, this is what you got to watch out for. What you're reading for your kids, probably not an issue because you're going to explain it in a dumbed down way, so to speak, anyway. But if you're doing a Bible study where you're getting into the word definitions, watch out.
Yeah. And so I would never recommend an NLT for a study Bible.